Chapter 95. F asterisk CK. The taunts went too far. Why sure didn't know how many times he blacked out today, but he immediately felt a chill in his abdomen. When he looked down, he saw a hard limb penetrating his body. At this moment, as the bloody ripples spread, the two were sent flying at the same time. Then they saw Qi Yuan raise his hands, responding to the black blood in the air, and suddenly press them down. Then countless black blood gathered into a cloud, and from the cloud, countless blood arrows shot down. Indiscriminately, everything within a radius of 10 meters was shrouded in them. Even the hard stone pillars were pierced by the blood arrows, and then all kinds of flowers and plants that didn't look like ornamental plants drilled out of the big holes, bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. In midair, Huaisher couldn't borrow any force. Like hell, he stretched out his hand, and a rope flew out, wrapped around the pillar behind him, and suddenly pulled him out of the attack range of this AoE skill. "Are you stupid? I'm Spider-Man." Just as he was about to gloat and watch Amber make a fool of herself, he saw Battle JK roar angrily, and the prayer beads on her wrist suddenly shattered. Then pieces of fiery red armor appeared on her body, completely covering her from head to toe. In the blink of an eye, she was dressed in a great armor, and even draped with a 3-fan pattern formation feather. "Take it head on. F asterisk CK. I'm facing an Iron Man." Why sure, this Spider-Man wasn't happy for long, and suddenly became a little brother. How is this rich woman so rich? He staggered to the ground, gritted his teeth, and pulled out the limb that was stabbed into his abdomen, but there was no blood on it, only a black burn mark. Soon, Huaisher found that the wound on his abdomen was slowly closing under the cover of the flames. Although he could feel waves of pain, it didn't affect his movement. This feeling is good. While there was still fuel in his negative energy engine, Huaisher took a deep breath, enchanted the sword and axe again, and rushed into the battle. "I still need to rely on this grandson to reduce my sentence. How can I let someone else chop off my head and run away?" Now, in Reichenhoope's hand, the border relic had once again transformed into a nearly 2-meter-long katana. Waving it around in her petite body, it looked indescribably strange, but the flames that lingered on the katana were genuine. No matter what her goal was, she didn't have much time left to loot the boss alone after separating herself from the main group. She decided to ignore the consumption of origin substance and simultaneously support the operation of a few border relics as she began to attack. What was more gratifying was that the other altars seemed to have been destroyed one after another, and the power transmitted to Qi Yuan was gradually becoming unstable. In the mirror image projection, the terrifying shadow of the 9-headed phoenix became more and more blurry, as if it was struggling with all its might. Finally, it raised its head and looked in Qi Yuan's direction. The beaks of its 9 heads opened and closed as if it were saying something. Qi Yuan was stunned. His expression was one of terror, but then his face turned ghastly pale. "Why did you abandon me, my lord?" he screamed and reached out to say something, but on the other side of the scene, a huge amount of black blood gushed out, drowning him like a final gift. The mirror image projection suddenly shattered, and the 9-headed phoenix's projection disappeared. However, Qi Yuan screamed in pain as he welcomed the last of the black blood. One head after another popped out of his neck, and the pressure that Huaisher and the others felt on his body continued to rise. It was unbelievable. At the same time, they could also sense the terrifying fluctuations coming from other places, which made it even harder for them to understand. The 9-headed phoenix had given up on its own power. It was even willing to shatter its divine mark in order to give all of its power to its believers. FCK, Reichenhoope cursed in an international manner. "You over there, don't just stand there. Hurry up and get rid of this guy. Otherwise," as if he had lost a loved one, Qi Yuan screamed in grief, but his body was rapidly becoming more and more deformed. As a believer that the nine-headed phoenix had personally baptized, after drinking the black blood, Qi Yuan had completely become a part of the nine-headed phoenix. He unconditionally obeyed all of the nine-headed phoenix's orders, almost like a puppet. Now that the puppet's strings were broken, it wasn't freedom for him, but as if he had lost the entire world. His blood-red eyes were filled with madness as he looked at Huaishur and the others. Naturally, there was no need for Reichenhupe to say anything. Huaishur gritted his teeth, roared, and rushed forward. What else was there to say? This wasn't a magical girl's world, and the other side wasn't a 14-year-old magical girl. The boss was about to transform. If they didn't hurry up and attack like crazy, were they waiting to be beaten? Qi Yuan had now become an out-and-out border mutant. After he received the nine-headed phoenix's final gift, he would become a small, incomplete version of the nine-headed phoenix. At that time, even if he didn't have the divine mark and his strength was greatly reduced, he would be able to easily deal with the two of them. Huaishur was advancing, but Reichenhupe took a step back. He raised his katana and dropped it, and a blazing flame suddenly rose above the border relic. Muramasa Kagura's inscriptions appeared on it. Then, as the girl roared, a frenzied wave of origin substance converged on the blade's edge. As she suddenly burst forward, it pierced through the layers of dancing black blood. New dark style mystery, unique sword. It was like a hot knife through butter. A terrifying storm wrapped in flames tore a large hole in Qi Yuan's deformed body. Then, Huaishur's katana chopped down. Even though he didn't have any awe-inspiring moves to call out, he had already completely unleashed the Theravada Tantra's dual blade inheritance. As he crazily chopped down, the dark thunder roared like a tide. Huaishur only felt his blood rapidly burning, merging into the violent lightning and turning into endless destruction and death, sprinkling down in the form of frost and desolation. In the almost frozen time, the ghost roared and wildly swung the steel and lightning in his hands. Layers of swollen flesh were torn apart, revealing the deformed organs and the face hidden within. Qi Yuan screamed. His deformed arm stabbed towards Huaishur, but it was immediately shattered. Blood-colored ripples spread out, but they were immediately shattered by the lightning on the katana. "You like to eat, don't you?" Huaishur roared. "Eat my universe origin darkness." The katana crisscrossed in the air, leaving behind a deep, cross-shaped wound on Qi Yuan's swollen body. Then he abandoned his katana and pulled out his last bag of tribulation ash and the rest of the liberator's dust, stuffing them into his deformed lungs. Finally, his 5 fingers formed a blade. The sealing hand, burning with origin substance, stabbed into Qi Yuan's rapidly closing wound and tightened its grip. An instant later, the raging origin darkness and intense light burst forth from Qi Yuan's body. After the ghost without the stigmata reached a balance, the two extremes of origin substance collided with each other, causing the most violent explosion and turbulence, causing Qi Yuan's body to swell. Then Muramasa Kagura's attack tore it to pieces. Moon chop! Suddenly, the glow of a waning moon rose from the burning blade of the katana. Under the illumination of the moonlight, everything seemed to stop for a moment. Only 16 crisscrossing flames crisscrossed in the air. Finally, they forcefully gathered into a beam and enveloped Qi Yuan. There was a hissing sound. Black blood gushed out from Qi Yuan's mutilated body like a tide. It quickly evaporated and dried in the flames and lightning, turning into stinky dust. The projection of the headless neck dissipated with a bang. As the deformed body exploded and rapidly decayed, Qi Yuan's mutilated body fell out from it. Then Reichenamber flew up and cut down the katana in ecstasy. The severed head. She shouted excitedly, "I've got it! In your dreams!" Huaisha roared and waved his hand. The rope of sorrow, which had been waiting for a long time at the back of the pillar, suddenly rushed out and wrapped around Reichenamber's great armor like a snake. It pulled Reichenamber back in midair. Then it wrapped around her limbs and suddenly tightened, sealing all her movements. Huaisha had already raised the axe in his hand and aimed it at Qi Yuan's mutilated face. The cold lightning illuminated Qi Yuan's dull eyes. Just like you said at that time, Qi Yuan, I'm here to send you off. Huaisha stepped on Qi Yuan's body and stared down at his face. Do you have anything else to say? Qi Yuan stared blankly at Huaisha's face. He coughed violently and spat out his broken organs. Soon, a mocking smile appeared on his face. Do whatever you want. He closed his eyes. The nightmare is finally coming to an end. Huaisha lowered his eyes indifferently. Your dream shouldn't have begun. It's just like many dreams in this world. The axe fell. Then the dark lightning burst out and swallowed everything. In the end, there was only a stinky pile of ashes left. The flames that shrouded Huaisha suddenly dissipated. Exhaustion and severe pain suddenly hit him. Huaisha staggered back 2 steps and sat on the ground, panting in embarrassment. He could finally rest. He had already fought the battle that he needed to fight. What happened next was not something that he could interfere with. At this time, he missed the bottle of happy water that was originally stuffed in the stigmata. Unfortunately, it had been destroyed. Otherwise, he would have been satisfied if he could drink 2 mouthfuls of it. Soon, he heard an exasperated roar not far away. You despicable bastard! Bastard! Tentacle monster! Country bumpkin! Cut my stomach! Reichenamber finally got up from the ground with a katana in her hand. She glared at Huaisha and said, I want to duel with you. Huaisha looked at her in shock. He looked at the emblem of the Social Security Bureau hanging on her waist in disbelief. Are you sure? Reichenamber raised her head proudly. What? You don't dare. Don't worry. I won't use the power of the stigmata. We will only compete. Before she finished speaking, she saw Huaisha take out his Astronomy Society badge from his trouser pocket and put it on his chest with a smile. Ms. Amber, as a member of the rescue team of the Social Security Bureau, you want to force me, the victim, and the civilian member of the inspector's assistant and confidential secretary of the Astronomy Society's Shanghai department to accept your challenge? Huaisha grinned, revealing the standard Astronomy Society business smile that he learned from AI Ching. Are you sure? Through the mask, Huaisha could not see Reichenamber's expression, but it was obvious that she was gnashing her teeth in anger. Yes, that's right. Authority dogs are so annoying, especially those responsible for snitching. They are especially annoying. From the anger of others, Huaisha experienced a long-lost pleasure. Just as he was about to say something to add fuel to Reichenamber's fire, he suddenly heard a sharp shattering sound, as if countless mirrors were smashed in an instant. The broken mirror world that blocked the surroundings suddenly disappeared. Chapter 96. What is that? Huaisha lowered his head in shock and stared at the dark abyss. The moment the surface of the mirror realm was broken, the entire mutated underground world finally revealed its true appearance. It was as if all the soil inside the Xian High subway had been dug up, forming an indescribable depression and gap under the huge city. The entire subway was at its edge, and if one looked inside, they would only see a void of darkness. Above the subway, the original 10 subway stations extended out like cliffs, carrying 10 important altars that hung above the abyss. The moment the mirror realm disappeared, the people on the stations could see each other without a doubt. 10 different battlefields, including the one Huaisha was at. The battles at 6 other altars had already ended. Wreckage and blood covered the ground, and the heads of the purified people who presided over the ritual were separated from their bodies. Even their altars had been destroyed. The battles at 3 other locations were still ongoing. The killing had not ended, but it was almost one-sided. The ascendants of the Eastern Summer were on a killing spree, destroying all resistance as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Amidst the efficient slaughter, the middle-aged leader turned around to take a look. When he saw traces of Hoopa, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he pointed at her with a stern and fierce expression. "You made the mistake of leaving the team without permission. Go back and write your own report." But soon, everyone's attention was attracted by the thing in the abyss. It was a corpse, a rotting corpse. Even a blind person could smell the pungent and sharp smell of decay, and a nauseating aura slowly rose from the abyss. But it was because of this that they found it even more unbelievable. At this moment, right in front of everyone's eyes, 9 Phoenix's terrifying body that was as huge as a building had completely rotted, dead, completely dead. No matter what it was, no one would believe that it was still alive after being torn apart to this extent, right? But what the hell was this? Everyone fought their way to the boss room, only to find that the boss had hanged himself. They did not even get any experience, let alone equipment. Why the hell were they still fighting? Everyone knew that it was wrong, all right? Now, the black blood that had lost its life was seeping out of its remains bit by bit, accumulating into a stinking lake. A large number of stinking maggots were being raised, and mosquitoes and flies were constantly flying up and down like clouds. It was nauseating. However, in this sinister and sinister environment, a ray of light lit up in the black blood lake. It was so pure and so glorious. It was a resplendent golden color. As the world shook, countless fragments of the mirror realm trembled. In that darkness, light exploded, piercing everyone's eyes. Inexplicably, everyone felt a sense of tranquility in their hearts. They actually wanted to bow their heads and kowtow in front of the light, witnessing a miracle. And in the light, a pair of exquisite eyes that seemed to be cast in gold slowly opened. From the boiling lake of black blood, a dignified figure slowly rose. It was as if he had broken free from his shell and was looking at the world. In front of this pair of eyes, everything was like dust. What the hell? Huaishir's first reaction was to feel a chill. He subconsciously wanted to retreat, but then he felt a large amount of burn marks on his skin. It was as if he was burned by that line of sight. Without a doubt, that light was definitely the nemesis of ghosts. No, it should be said that it was their natural enemy. If this kind of thing was scattered a little bit, wouldn't he be burned to death in that light? Feeling an inexplicable sense of crisis, Huaishir subconsciously hid behind Rigian, Hoopa, separated by a layer of fiery red great armor. He finally felt a little better. He hurriedly put on his gloves and mask. Even if it didn't have much of an effect, his heart seemed to be comforted. He squatted on the ground, hiding behind Rigian, Hoopa, although he didn't want to admit what was going on with his outrageous appearance. He was simply trembling. Golden-winged great Pengming King, Rigian Hoopa stared blankly at that light. The Prajna mask on his face actually cracked, and his voice became hoarse and shocked. No, in Dongsha, it should be called Fifth Order Stigmata, Golden Wing Dapeng. What the hell? Huaishir was stunned. Is it an ally? It better be like that. Rigian Hoopa also cautiously retreated. The two of them were almost lying at the bottom of the steps, cautiously looking up. Even though such a sacred and dignified light had descended, their hearts were still heavy, and they couldn't look straight at that terrifying guess. If it wasn't an ally, then there was only one possibility. That was the 9-headed phoenix, or rather, it used to be the 9-headed phoenix. connecting it to the complicated ceremony he had seen and the various abnormalities that wouldn't appear during the Fifth Order advancement. Ridgian Hoopa finally came to a conclusion. Therefore, it was even more unbelievable. It changed its path of ascension. It was obvious that the nine-headed phoenix's high-grade stigmata couldn't possibly be the golden-winged Dapeng. Even if they were both incomplete advancements in the Dongxia lineage, the two were completely different. It was even more different than the phoenix of Dongxia and the phoenix of Rome. Thinking of this, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the abyss again. Then, she quickly retracted her head and patted her chest in great relief. No, this isn't the golden-eyed miracle-winged bird king of the Dongxia lineage. It's the Fifth Order stigmata of the Indian lineage, Garuda. What's the difference between the two? At this point, the two of them were about to shrink to the bottom of the stairs. The light above was too strong. It was simply an innate suppression of the stigmata, which also belonged to the negative attribute. If they were not careful, they might just disappear from the face of the earth. At this moment, they heard the whistling of the hurricane. Amidst Garuda's angry screams, the light blazed and burst out like an ocean. It finally crawled out of the abyss of transformation and slowly spread its wings, which were riddled with holes, and broke free of the Discovery Realm's shackles bit by bit. In front of it, a pitch-black crack slowly opened, and one could vaguely see flowing light and rainbows, as well as countless scenes like bubbles. But what shocked Weisher was, what's up with its wings? That pair of wings, riddled with holes, could be described as tragic. It was hard to imagine that something could rely on this thing to fly. Thanks to it, it couldn't even completely crawl out of the abyss of its transformation. It's probably an incomplete advancement, right? Behind Weisher, someone said, it should be said that it's congenitally deficient. Because there was a problem with the ritual, he didn't wash away all of his Yin attribute. There was still a part of it left, which led to the conflict with Garuda. At that moment, Weisher and Li Jian, who were terrified and quiet, they suddenly turned around and pointed their swords and axes at the person who had appeared there without them knowing. Then they froze in place. Old Lu, Weisher was stunned. Why are you here? Are you kidding? Why can't I, a recorder of the Astronomy Association, come? I should be the one asking you. Yu Dongri smoked calmly. Even if you want to die, you can't do this, right? It's a coincidence. Weisher laughed dryly. I just want to make a contribution as soon as possible and reduce my sentence as soon as possible. When did you come? I arrived when you were talking about the deviation. Seeing that you were serious, I didn't disturb you. By the way, I've sent away the seriously injured person below. You don't have to worry. Yu Dongri was also lying on the steps, using a telescope to spy on Garuda's movements. He sighed. It's so tragic. How did it become like this? I'm so sorry. Weisher was stunned, and his eyes immediately became suspicious. His wings, were you the one who did it? I'm ashamed to say this. Yu Dongri smoked happily. A few days ago, although I found out that the restaurant of the Allbird banquet was opened by the Guijing people, and they were secretly collecting bird eyes, I had no idea what they were going to do. So I thought, no matter what they are going to do, let's do something first. Yu Dongri was enraptured as he talked about these things. Then I simply went to the kitchen and stuffed a bunch of bats and duck eyes into them while we were eating. Then he changed the pair of flip-flops under his feet, and the pair of flip-flops was obviously not a set. The yellow flip-flop on the left had a SpongeBob SquarePants on it, and the pink flip-flop on the right had a white Hello Kitty printed on it. The moment he appeared, whether it was Lu Dongli, Li Jian, Hoopa, or the other ascendants, they all breathed a sigh of relief. This time it's settled. Yu Dongri wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and let out a long breath. The director of the Dongxia Social Security Bureau, the cabinet minister, the person who truly held the most power in the Dongxia family tree. Destin Xianyao, young ones, you've worked hard. Finish your work early and go home for dinner. The old man glanced back at his subordinates and then at the bowl of instant noodles in his hand. He could not help but sigh. Eating instant noodles all the time, my stomach can't take it. As he said that, he lowered his head and slurped the last of the noodles into his mouth. Then he picked up the bowl and drank the soup. Then he wiped his mouth and looked at Garuda, who was in the abyss of terror under his feet. Not a bad idea. He's a promising one. Xianyao commented lightly. Too bad. As he said that, he raised the plastic fork in his hand and stabbed it at Garuda from afar. They were both level 5, but Garuda's expression was like he had seen a ghost. He screamed in terror, and his broken left wing started to fight. In an instant, countless shadows rose from where he was and flew in all directions. In the blink of an eye, he left the small Exine high city behind him. The open sky. If Garuda wanted to run, no one could stop him. Anyway, that was what the mythological source book said. Unfortunately, the group of bastards who wrote the setting were now eating books. Even though he had tens of thousands of clones under the old man's indifferent gaze, the countless clones dissipated rapidly like bubbles. Even though he had escaped tens of thousands of miles away, under the plastic fork that was gradually approaching, no matter how hard he flapped his wings, he could not increase the distance between them by an inch. In the end, he let out a shrill scream. He suddenly screamed from above the sea and shattered a piece of space, trying to escape from the mirror realm. But when he escaped from the ravages of the space turbulence, he realized in despair that he had returned to his original spot, motionless. Only the plastic fork was able to stab it in the eye with ease. At the last moment, a trace of determination flashed across Garuda's eyes. The holy cleansing fire rose from his body and swallowed him in an instant. The broken mirror realm suddenly shook and swallowed him. Mirror realm shift. This was the contract between paradise and the mirror realm. 91 years ago, during the catastrophe of the worlds, the rancher married the ruler of the mirror realm, the Queen of Rotten Dreams. The two inhuman existences had intercourse in the maze realm for 16 years. After giving birth to a surviving evil, they formed an eternal contract. Since then, all the purified people were bestowed with the power of the mirror realm by the rancher. At this moment, Garuda had already entered the deepest part of the mirror realm maze, hiding himself in the deepest part of the countless vaults. He switched between reality and illusion. Only a reflection was left in the original place. In the next moment, the illusion shattered. Garuda, who was in the depths of the mirror realm, was also ejected. There was a huge hole in his head. He did not have long to live. However, this short gap had already bought him enough time. At that moment, he raised his head and screamed. He summoned the rancher's power. He was going to call for help. And so, in the blink of an eye, the door of paradise opened behind him. A majestic aura froze the entire underground. Countless hunting angels flew out like a flood, blood red like rainbows. They shot out from the incomplete hunting angels. Before the mystic bird could even make a move, they had already been cut to pieces. In the midst of the bloody storm, a sudden boom came from the turbulent world behind the door. Then, a slender figure struggled pathetically, screaming as he flew out. "Help!" The slender figure tumbled in the air in a panic. "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" The figure quickly enlarged in Garuda's dazed eyes. In the end, it smashed into his incomplete face. In the chaos, the figure instinctively reached out and slashed randomly. Garuda's head fell from his neck. In an instant, a cold light flashed and shattered his bones. He died on the spot. Even before he died, he did not understand why he did not call for the saint god's help, but instead a fiend. In the chaotic collision, the figure that fell from the sky crashed into the altar, kicking up a cloud of dust. He coughed violently. Amidst the mess, the young girl struggled to her feet. She looked around with a blank expression. Where is this? She looked around at the familiar faces in shock. Where am I? Where did I run to? Chapter 99. Where is this? She stared at the familiar faces around her in shock. Where am I? Where did I run off to? When they saw the confused expression on her face, everyone from the Mystic Bird to the Social Security Bureau couldn't help but cover their faces in embarrassment. Their heads hurt. The white pigeon that had appeared out of nowhere landed on her shoulder. After cooing a few times, she let out a sigh of relief. Discovery? That's good, that's good. I knew it was getting weirder and weirder the more I walked. I couldn't even find anyone. As she spoke, she puffed out her chest proudly. Who said I was lost? I didn't run too far. Yes, the young girl, White Emperor's disciple, was still lost. A.H. Amidst the awkward silence, a shocked yell suddenly sounded out. The young girl turned around and saw the altar that she had smashed, as well as Weisher, who had been so scared by the thing that had fallen from the sky that he was sitting on the ground. He stared blankly at White Emperor's disciple in front of him. He looked at the image on his phone in disbelief. You. White Emperor's disciple was confused. What about me? She hadn't even finished speaking when she felt that person rush forward and grab her hand. His face was red, and his eyes seemed to be shining. You are the only card that I want. Zhu Qingyu was stunned. She didn't know how to react. There's warmth? It's actually real. Heavens! Weisher held her hand. He was so moved that tears almost filled his eyes. Who said that paper people didn't have thickness? Big sister, did you come from the two-dimensional world just to see me? Weisher asked excitedly. Are you free tonight? Can we have dinner together? That wasn't. I'm so popular. Zhu Qingyu stared at him in shock, wondering if he had mistaken her for someone else. But when she saw his eyes, which were filled with passion and anticipation, and his expression of joy and passion, as well as the hands that were holding her hand, for some reason, her mind suddenly went haywire. It was as if an abstract image of a mango had appeared in the midst of her chaotic thoughts, bringing with it a shocking conjecture. Her mouth fell open in shock. Prelude, Daddy in Hell. I think I've been confessed to, for the first time in 15 years. He felt such a terrifying impact. She suddenly felt dizzy as she stared blankly at the young man in front of her, not knowing what to do. I'm sorry, I'm only 15. I'm still young. Her tongue suddenly started to fight as she stammered, Moreover, I don't even know your name yet, and you for this kind of thing, shouldn't we get to know each other better first? I didn't mean. The more she tried to explain, the more confused she became. In the end, she almost gave up on herself. She closed her eyes and shouted, Anyway, that kind of thing can only be discussed after I'm 18. Weisher was stunned, not knowing what she was talking about. Very soon, he sensed the gazes of the Ascenders in the distance landing on him. They were stunned, shocked, gloomy, and ice-cold. They were practically shooting daggers at his back. When he finally realized what he had just said, he was immediately drenched in sweat. He was dumbfounded, and his smile gradually disappeared. He felt as if he had just done a whole set of broadcast gymnastics on the edge of death. Don't panic. Why, sure, don't panic. Calm down. Use your brain. Think of a way to save yourself from this hopeless situation. In that instant, Huaishi's mind spun like lightning. Finally, he found the only way out of the countless paths leading to the crematorium. Ahem, actually, I'm a fan of yours. He squeezed out a smile and tried his best to act like an amiable older brother. Can you give me an autograph? Okay. Zhu Qingyu also reacted. His face was red as he lowered his head. After waiting for a while, he asked in a low voice, Can you let go of my hand a little? Okay. Huaishi awkwardly let go of his hand and smiled at the other older brothers and sisters who had come to his rescue. However, he couldn't help but rub his hand against White Dizzy's back. It felt so good. He wanted to cry in his heart. After receiving the autograph pen from Huaishi, White Dizzy rummaged through his pockets but couldn't find any paper. Huaishi suggested, Why don't you sign on my clothes? No, wait a moment. Who knew what strange scene she was imagining, but the young woman's face became even redder. She hurriedly refused, looked around, and quickly jumped into the abyss. Then she quickly returned, holding a palm-sized transparent crystal in her hand. She randomly signed her name on it, then lowered her head and shoved it over. Here. Thank you. Huaishi hurriedly reached out. As he took it, he accidentally touched her finger. She retracted her hand as if she had been electrocuted. Then she turned around and said, You're welcome. I should go now. She had just taken a step when her legs gave out, and she stumbled. Very quickly, she lowered her head and avoided everyone's gazes. Taking advantage of the fact that the door to the paradise hadn't closed yet, she ran in as if she was running away. In the silence, Huaishi was the only one left standing at the edge of the platform. He stared in shock at the abyss that had disappeared as the mirror realm shattered. Finally, he lowered his head and looked at the crystal in his hand that he had signed. What a pity, he muttered. I should have asked for a WeChat. Smack! An old hand patted him on the shoulder, causing him to tremble all over. When he turned around stiffly, he saw Xian Niao standing behind him with a gloomy expression. Hey, kid! The old man narrowed his eyes and scrutinized this audacious bastard. Do you know the consequences of harassing a minor? Murderous intent surged. Huaishi's legs gave out. He subconsciously wanted to beg for mercy, but then he reacted. Wait, I'm a minor too. Xian Niao was stunned and speechless. At this time, the cowherd who was blinded by his little brother's series of actions finally reacted. He hurriedly came over and squeezed out a smile to say something nice. He's 17 this year. Please be magnanimous. 17? Xian Niao was furious. Dropping out of school at such a young age. You don't study hard and learn to fall in love with someone else. Drop out of school, my ass. Why are you the same as Director Fu? Part-time. This is all part-time to support the family. Huaishi mustered up the courage to raise his hand. Besides, I play the cello very well. I got a lot of extra points for the college entrance examination. Xian Niao did not seem to believe him. He pulled him over and stared at him. One of his eyes turned pure black as he stared at Huaishi as if he could see through fate. Xian Niao's eye of destiny. He did not know what he saw, but his expression changed slightly. Huai Guang's great-grandson. How rare. He seemed to be stunned. After pondering for a moment, his expression suddenly became kind. There's no future in working at the Astronomy Society. Kid, do you want to work at the Social Security Bureau? How about I put you in the same group as Xiaobai? You can see each other every day after your college entrance examination. You don't have to care about any university. I'll write a recommendation letter for you. You can go directly to Jixia University to further your studies. After 4 years, you'll be a civil servant with an iron rice bowl. The salary will be high, and there won't be many things to do. How about it? For a moment, Huaishi's eyes were almost covered by the words iron rice bowl. A good harvest, a fulfilling life, and a stable career. Thinking of his dirty deeds, he swallowed his saliva and shook his head with difficulty. He sternly refused. Thank you for your kindness, but there's no need. I've decided to dedicate my life to protecting the peace of the present realm. TSK, both of you are slippery. The old man seemed to shake his head unhappily, but he did not say anything else. He just waved his hand to instruct his subordinates to take care of the wounded, and disappeared without a trace in the unfolding night. He still had other things to do, so he did not have time to dawdle here. Before he left, he saw Hoopa glare at him with hatred. He did not know whether she meant to say that he should wait for her to call for help, or that she planned to beat him up when he walked at night to vent her hatred for taking his head today. Huaishi waved his hand lightly and pointed to the sign on his chest. He smiled but did not say anything. Come and beat me. Thus, the chaos came to an abrupt end. Under the hammer that fell from the sky, all the conspiracies and tricks were completely defeated by absolute power. The Social Security Bureau had perfectly proven their strength and Dongxia's foundation. It wouldn't be long before this war came to an end, right? But that had nothing to do with Huaishi. When he was carried out of the subway by Yu Dongri, he only saw the night sky. He did not know when, but it was already night. The whole city was still shining, and the few short explosions during the day were easily forgotten by the non-existent chemical plant in the eastern suburbs. Although there was chaos, it should be quickly calmed down, right? The world was still operating. Huaishi breathed a sigh of relief and felt his whole body was finally relaxed. When he sat in the ambulance to check his body, he saw the familiar wheelchair. The pale-faced Ai Qing was quietly on an drip. When she saw Huaishi, she nodded slightly. Well done. Ah, it's nothing. Huaishi smiled embarrassedly and was about to be modest when he heard the second half of her sentence. Especially confessing to a 15-year-old girl in front of so many people, it's quite your style. Huaishi suddenly wanted to explain, but he saw Ai Qing waving her hand with a calm face. In the future, if you are mentally retarded, please look at the environment a little. Don't be crushed by the parents behind them, okay? Okay. Huaishi nodded embarrassedly and curled up on the bed, trying to reduce his presence. However, after Yu Dongri finished dealing with Director Fu, he squeezed over to him and sighed. Brother, you've earned a lot. He looked at the crystal signed by Prince Bai in Huaishi's pocket. A failed confession can get such a luxurious consolation prize. It's unheard of. What's this? Huaishi was stunned. He picked up the ordinary-looking crystal and looked at it over and over again, but he couldn't see what magical effects it had. Is this very powerful? Old Lu rolled his eyes. Crystal of Wishes. Don't you think it's powerful? Crystal of Wishes. Huaishi was curious. Can it be used to make a wish? Let's pray with a limit. Ai Qing glanced at it. It should be a crystal of origin formed by the miraculous contraction of Garuda's body after he was killed in an instant. If this power was released in an instant, it would be able to shake the balance of the Silver Ocean and achieve many unimaginable things. Of course, there was no need to mention nonsense like world peace. At best, it would only be able to achieve what humans could do in advance. Huaishi was surprised. This is also very powerful, okay? Seeing his excited expression, Ai Qing shook her head. But compared to the real thing, this is just a defective product. You'd better not have too much hope. As for what Huaishi would wish for, she didn't care. In any case, this guy would only wish for a pile of money, right? This kind of wish could be exchanged for tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of assets, right? Then Huaishi uneasily picked up the crystal of wishes in his hand and asked seriously, I want my family to come back. Can it be fulfilled? Ai Qing fell silent. Yu Dongri looked away. Aha, can it? Huaisher laughed awkwardly and scratched his head. That's right. He probably won't care about this kind of excessive wish. In that instant, the crystal in his hand suddenly shook. Cracks appeared on the surface of the crystal. In the blink of an eye, it quickly turned turbid and turned into something like old glass. There was no longer any wonder. In the silence, the three of them were stunned. Soon, the night became restless. Outside the window, they saw a golden light shoot up into the sky, tearing through the layers of black clouds and revealing the brilliant starlight. The direction where the light rose. Is it my house? Huaisher jumped up in fright. By the time Yu Dongri drove over with him, it was already more than 10 minutes later. The brilliant golden light had already dissipated and was replaced by a soft yellow light in front of the door and a brand new nameplate of the Chalcedony Hall. Huaisher jumped out of the car and stared blankly at the brand new courtyard behind the fence. The originally overgrown weeds had disappeared, and the dusty statues were as clean as new. In the center of the courtyard, the broken marble fountain was once again filled with clear spring water. And just behind the layers of shade, the brightly lit main building no longer had any traces of damage. Not only were the broken windows and cracks on the walls, but even the entire building seemed to have been turned back in time, returning to its former exquisiteness and magnificence. The bright light of the crystal chandelier shone out from the hall. It illuminated the thin figure waiting in front of the door. The old man wore a black bow tie and a spotless suit. His mottled white hair was meticulously combed to the back of his head as he stood upright at the bottom of the steps. He smiled at the young man who had just returned. Dinner is ready, young master. He opened the door for Huaisher and took the excrement in his hand. He smiled warmly and kindly. Welcome home. Huaisher stared blankly at the old face. He had never seen such a face and figure in his memory, but for some reason he felt that it was so familiar, as if they had been together for more than 10 years. They had never been separated. It was like a dream. He followed behind the old man in a daze, passed through the door that was open for him, and walked into the hall. He looked around at the quaint decorations and the scenes that he would only return to in his dreams. Finally, he walked into the dining room and sat at the front of the table. He looked at the steaming dinner in front of him. Huaisher picked up the chopsticks, but he hesitated. He looked back at the old man behind him. Is this for me? Of course. The old man smiled in shame. I'm sorry because I haven't cooked for many years, and the reserves at home are a little insufficient. I can only make this in a hurry. Please forgive me. No, it's fine. Huaisher shook his head and picked up the bowl of rice. He picked up a tender green vegetable with his chopsticks and carefully tasted it. He paused and slowly put down his chopsticks. The old butler bent down and asked softly, Is it not to your liking? No, it's delicious. Huaisher lowered his head and rubbed his red eyes. He could no longer hold back the urge to cry. It's really delicious. It was like when he had lost everything. Now that he had regained everything, he couldn't help but want to hug his family and cry. After a long period of time, after witnessing many miracles and disasters, after experiencing innumerable pain and praying, after a long period of time, after witnessing countless miracles and disasters, after experiencing innumerable pain and prayers, Huaisher finally realized his wish. He went home. Outside the Stone Marrow restaurant, he watched the young man walk into the door. Now is not the time for guests to visit. We should go. Ai Ching knocked on the window and reminded Yu Dongri, who was pacing outside. If there's anything, let's talk about it tomorrow. Okay. He retracted his gaze regretfully and returned to the car. However, he smelled the familiar smell of cigarettes. He couldn't help but be stunned. You smoke? In the back seat, the girl looked at the warm light in the window and answered calmly, "It's just when I'm in a good mood." He scrutinized the middle-aged man, who appeared calm on the surface, but in reality, his hand had already reached for the gun handle. He immediately shook his head like a rattle drum. "No way. No way. Uncle, we won't do it." Director Fu heaved a sigh of relief. "Just how scared are you of me harming your daughter?" Why Sher's heart was broken. Who would harm your daughter? Your daughter has always been the one harming others. Forget it. In order to prevent this guy from exploding on the spot, I won't say this out loud. After an hour-long report, Weisher finally received the red-stamped notice from Director Fu. After he packed up his things in the detention room, he was kicked out of the Special Affairs Department. He was free once more, at least until the next time he committed a crime. Weisher picked up his guitar case and looked back at the Special Affairs Department where he had lived for a long time. He felt a little reluctant to leave and even wanted to stay for a few more days after a few dry coughs. He shook his head. His house was no longer the haunted house it used to be. Even the Wi-Fi was 300 megabytes. There was no need for him to miss the hard bed. Life is so beautiful. When he thought about the more than 10 million yuan in his bank account, his mood became more and more cheerful. He decided to extravagantly take a taxi. As soon as he walked onto the road, he saw a car parked across the road. There was also a girl looking at him through the rolled-down window. AI Ching. Weisher was stunned. "I didn't expect someone to pick me up from prison." "You didn't stay in prison for long, right?" AI Ching asked. After Weisher got in the car, she waved her hand and signaled the driver in the front row to start driving. Then she threw a stack of reports and notices into Weisher's hands. "What is this?" Weisher curiously flipped through the reports. They were all words that he didn't understand at all. "It's all a bunch of meaningless copies. Just put them away." AI Ching said, "From now on, no one will pursue the trouble you caused a few days ago." Originally, the Jinling branch was prepared to be blamed by the Social Security Bureau this time. Those bastards wanted to beg for mercy before they even started. If it weren't for Xian Niao personally giving you the green light, I'm afraid you would have a lot of trouble this time. Xian Niao? Green light? Weisher was stunned. "Huh, didn't Director Fu tell you?" AI Ching looked over. Apparently, Xian Niao directly asked and finalized the matter as an emergency arrest allowed by the Social Security Bureau. Chi, when was suspected of colluding with criminal forces and foreign terrorist organizations outside the border and was investigated. As for the accidental killing of Chi, when during the arrest, you probably received a few insignificant punishments. Congratulations, you're acquitted. Acquitted. Weisher lowered his head and looked at the parole notice in his other hand. He suddenly widened his eyes. He was tricked by that old man, Director Fu, again. When he thought about how he was tricked into signing so many useless documents at the Special Affairs Division, he was so angry that his teeth itched. "Looks like you've suffered a lot." AI Ching retracted her gaze, gloatingly. "Just take it as retribution for writing so many reports. Old Fu won't be having a good time these days." "Forget it. I won't argue with him." Weisher clenched his teeth for a long time, then tore the parole notice in his hand into shreds and threw it away, pretending that it had never happened. After asking the people of the Pure Ones about the closure of the mess, he finally asked, "What's next? Is there any work at the astronomy club?" "Everything is as usual, but it basically has nothing to do with you." AI Ching counted with her fingers. "The rest are all reports, 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 and reports. You can't deal with the aftermath. Besides, the higher-ups might not be able to deal with it." "Huh." Weisher was confused. Yesterday's news said that the expeditionary force of Dongsha had successfully returned to Exine City. It could be said that the results were remarkable. However, there was a bit of a problem in Xian City. The people of the Pure ones used various methods to try to open up a path to Shanghai. Including Xian High, there were a total of 17 places. One of them was almost successful. AI Ching turned on her phone and showed him the dark location. The path was opened for a moment, although it closed immediately. However, according to the satellite's detection, something had been thrown into Shanghai. I'm afraid that the Social Security Bureau is also having a headache over this matter. Is it very troublesome? It's hard to say. AI Ching shrugged. The Social Security Bureau probably has a team stationed in Magic City. If something goes wrong, they'll be able to react quickly. After all, Xian Niao is quite generous. It's not to the extent that she won't say anything just to cover it up. Now, the two sides are negotiating how to deal with it, but it has nothing to do with us. However, before the problem is solved, a small place like ours won't appear in the eyes of the higher-ups. It can only be said that it's good and bad. Close the door and live a good life, right? Why sure understood. That's the theory, but a certain guy still has a lot of messy things to do. AI Ching turned back to the topic. When do you plan to go to Jinling? All the ascendants have to register their identity, and there's also that strange mark on your body. Before that, you'd better find a way to solve the problem, she said straightforwardly. If you can't solve it, please think of an excuse that won't implicate me. I'll try my best. Huaisher scratched his head and sighed. How about next month? Anyway, I'm going to Jinling for my cello professional exam next month, so I might as well do it together. Oh. AI Ching looked at him with a strange expression. You're also planning to participate in the rookie competition? Huaisher was confused. What rookie competition? Looks like you really don't know. AI Ching stared at him for a long time. After making sure that he wasn't playing dumb, she explained, it's a large-scale competition organized by Tomorrow News. It's a triennial Asian rookie competition. As long as you're in Asia, all ascendants below the 3rd level can sign up. Not only are the prizes generous, but there are also a lot of benefits. Other than a lot of ascendants who want to win a ranking, many ascendant organizations see this as a way to show their foundation. Regardless of whether it was for the prize, reputation, or advancement, this was an excellent opportunity. If you can get into the top 10, other than the prizes, it'll help you get promoted and do other things. At this point, AI Ching gave Huaisher a deep look. To be honest, I thought you would be determined to win. Although it sounds lively, it's troublesome to participate. Huaisher scratched his head. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Maybe I won't even be able to go. At this point, Huaisher suddenly looked out the window and said to the driver, just stop here. He saw Fu Yi. Call me if you need anything. I'll leave first. Huaisher picked up his backpack and jumped out of the car. He waved at AI Ching and watched the car drive away. When he looked back at Fu Yi, he noticed that she seemed to be in a hurry. She looked panicked and anxious. It was like she was being chased by someone. She ran in the crowd and looked at the people chasing her anxiously. Finally, she ran into a small alley. The middle-aged men chasing her looked at each other and revealed a wretched smile. They sped up and ran into the alley. Soon, Fu Yi's scream came from inside. Huaisher frowned. Unfortunately, even as a stage 4 ascendant, the existence of a spirit coffin was too extravagant and rare. Huai Guang could only follow the blueprint and use the incomplete blueprint he had obtained by chance to construct it. In the end, it was inevitable that he would fail. He didn't obtain the spirit coffin, but instead, he was given the stone Marrow Hall's origin substance by accident. It was as if his Midas touch had turned him into gold. After this failure, Huai Guang didn't have the resources to construct a second time, so he could only give up. However, he didn't erase the stone marrow hall's origin substance out of anger. Instead, he spent a lot of effort to maintain this consciousness that was still in the process of being nurtured. He hoped that after 100 years, this kindness would be returned to his descendants through this budding consciousness. Fang Shu was indeed Huai Shi's family member. In terms of seniority, there was no one more qualified than him to be considered a part of the Huai clan. If his descendants had been able to live a little longer, they would at least have been able to enjoy a resurgence. Unfortunately, after only 50 years, the Huai clan had fallen to an unimaginable state. Fang Shu's fragmented consciousness wanted to salvage the situation, but it was powerless. He could only watch on helplessly as Huai Shi shouldered all of the burden. It wasn't until Huai Shi's wish passed through the wish crystal and landed on Fang Shu's body that he was able to recover his missing origin substance that he was barely able to manifest. Even if he couldn't walk out of the stone marrow hall, he was finally able to walk around freely. According to Crow's conclusion, the stone marrow hall had already become a relic from the border, and a very rare one at that. Huai Shi couldn't be bothered to listen to a bunch of nonsensical analysis. In any case, Fang Shu was a part of his family, so there was no point in looking into it too much. And after being in charge of the house for so many years, Fang Shu seemed to have grown quite fond of his identity as a housekeeper. Whether it was cleaning, cooking, gardening, or maintaining the nursery, he was very adept at it all. Fixing antennas from above, digging cables from below. As long as it was a household matter, there was nothing he didn't know how to do. Huai Shi didn't have to worry about anything as long as he was able to take care of everything on his own. He had already gone from being a struggling youth to a fat otaku who ate 5 meals a day. In less than a week, he had gained a few kilograms of weight. He was so happy that he couldn't even wear the pants he had just bought. And now, someone wanted to cut off his food budget. How dare they? Even if Huai Shi, died in this house today, I wouldn't miss a single bite of food if I jumped down from here. Crow said, with the remaining parts, I've helped you weave all of them into pseudonerves and reflex circuits. Now, you can attack at twice the speed of someone of the same level. How is it? Are you happy? Are you happy? Happy my asterisk, SS. What kind of operation is cutting the mana bar to increase DPS? It turned out that his stigmata was really like a car. Without saying a word, she changed the fuel tank to an external type and then stuffed a nitrogen engine into it. Huai Shi almost vomited blood. Do you know that it's illegal to modify a car on the road? It's illegal for others to modify it. I'm doing a fandom creation. Do you understand? Crow squinted at him and said, Relax. It's been so many years since the Utopia split up. Do you think those guys who have fallen into hell and become the destruction element, the Golden Dawn, will ask you for copyright fees? Huai Shi covered his face. So can you please tell me at once what the hell this stigmata on my body has become? Don't worry, there are no hidden dangers or troubles. Sister's craftsmanship is famous. Speaking of this, Crow suddenly beamed. Although it's called a modification, it's actually a complete reconstruction. It's completely tailored to your fighting style. In addition to the Ghost's super adaptability to hell, I also added extra speed. Then there's the instantaneous explosive power provided by the external fuel. Therefore, the patience required for a long battle is relatively average. As for defense, sorry, it's equivalent to none. You'll have to rely on positioning. Anyway, the limit of a Tier 1 stigmata is there. No matter how good your defense is, you can only resist 1 or 2 slashes. It can't even block bullets. It's not cost-effective at all. So, our positioning is explosive. Crow said excitedly, You know the crispy killer, right? My standard has always been to kill my teammates in one round. We'll go up and explode, then run away. If we encounter someone who doesn't die, we'll find another opportunity to explode. If we can backstab, we'll backstab. If we can be despicable, we'll be despicable. With the heart poison and the aura of fear. Even if we encounter someone with high HP and defense, they'll be seriously injured if they don't die. But when you encounter someone who's good at grappling and has a suppressive support, don't get entangled. Once your positioning is restricted, it's over. You didn't expect me to be a thief? Huaishir smiled bitterly, but did not say anything else. In all fairness, it wasn't easy to have so many of them. Unless there were multiple eyes, how could there be so many buckets in the world? Moreover, Crow's custom-made system was a high-precision special that played to its strengths and avoided its weaknesses. What else could he say? He sighed and looked at Crow seriously. What exactly are you trying to do? Pa! A pair of ghostly wings slapped the back of his head. Kid, why are you asking so many questions? His limbs were fixed, tied to a cross, and finally sealed in a cabin that looked like a hamster ball. What was incredible was that he could still see the scene outside. Those warm and gentle faces, those expectant eyes, and those solemn expressions of expectation. He saw the display in the corner called the depth gauge, present. Then, the lights on countless meters lit up, and all kinds of strange parameters changed rapidly. Finally, through the cabin door, he saw the priest suddenly pull down the lever while solemnly chanting. It was as if the rope on the guillotine had been cut off. At that moment, violent tremors began. In the dizzying, sharp sound, something seemed to be stripped away. Perhaps it was reason, perhaps it was air, or perhaps it was something that human beings relied on to exist. Border. He fell from the sky, but it seemed that he had always been there. The bubble of reality was broken, and he peeked at the scene hidden behind the curtain. In the intense dizziness and pain, he saw endless yellow sand outside the cabin, as if the desolation and loneliness extended to the end of the world. The sky was full of cracks, and even a black gap appeared. Something huge flew past the broken sky, casting a ferocious shadow on the ground. There was a roaring sound in the wind. There was a vague shadow passing by outside the cabin. They were in groups, forming a long line. Their vague silhouettes were like ghosts, twisting under the scorching sun. Something among them cast an indifferent glance at him, with vicious mockery and compassionate pity. Fear made him cry out, but no one seemed to hear him. They gradually went away. After an unknown period of time, the violent tremors began again. He began to fall. More and more things were stripped away, or rather, he abandoned himself. He sank into an even deeper place. Chapter 104. Hell, Depth 1. Outside the cabin was the ruins of an ancient city. Dried bones and decayed steel were scattered everywhere as if they had experienced a disaster, but also as if they had not. It was just decay. Everything was silent. The entire city seemed to have died and turned into ruins. Only behind the huge broken arch, in the sky, something seemed to have awakened. It opened its eyes and looked down at him with its huge eyes like the moon. Between the rotten sky and the ruined earth, pale faces fluttered like butterflies under the blood-red moonlight. The cold was like a sticky tide, swallowing him little by little. It took away all the warmth. Huaishir could not help but start to pant. The fear and uneasiness conveyed in the memory was like a tide, constantly hitting him. He could only constantly strip the negative emotions from his body and turn them into ashes. Even so, he still could not stop the bone-piercing cold. The pain like a poison screamed in the depths of his consciousness. The subject roared, cried, and wanted to struggle, but no one spoke to him from beginning to end. Only the violent tremors began again. The depth gauge showed again. Depth 3. There was a roar outside the cabin. the loud noise of countless heavy machinery operating. Lava surged under the hollow ground, and the rusty assembly line could be seen. This was a project built on hell. The huge assembly line was constantly rotating, and countless people were hung on rows of scarlet hooks. It was as if they were still alive, constantly struggling and crying in despair. As the assembly line moved, they were sent to the workshop one by one. Amidst the constant cutting and crushing, the tragic screams and screams disappeared. In the end, only the sharp screams of steel rubbing against each other were left. Finally, the assembly line turned into tables, chairs, lamps, clocks, and bronze mirrors sent to the deepest part of the darkness. Depth 7 War. War was like a flood and fire, drowning everything. The roars of battle filled their ears. Monsters were fighting against monsters. Tens of thousands of giants gathered in one place. Their bodies were covered in steel. They were like slaves being whipped by their masters. They roared as they stepped on the corpses and moved forward. The chains were pulled on the necks of larger creatures. The dozen or so women were hundreds of meters tall. They were completely naked, and their flaxen hair was burning with flames. They wept and howled in grief as they were pulled forward. They sang loudly in pain and despair. Hot blood dripped from the wounds on their backs that seemed to have been torn apart by wings. Above their heads hung a damaged halo. His voice was hoarse and shrill. Praise the dead god. Depth 9, in the endless ocean, the primordial soup of life was boiling. Huge beasts and monsters were devouring each other, and then they were turned into ashes by the thunder and fire that fell from the sky and the lava that cracked the earth. Once again, they began a futile reincarnation. Depth 10 Darkness, endless darkness. In the midst of the desolation, there was a figure sitting quietly on a metal rock, as if he was a prisoner. He was talking, he was singing, he was dancing, waiting for death. Depth, chaos, dazzling light, death, destruction, God's despair, 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 despair. In the endless fall, he learned fear, began to scream, and fell into madness. Finally, he comprehended despair. In the end, when everything was about to be destroyed, that person subconsciously shouted out that name, Mom. And so, everything came to an abrupt end. Darkness struck. He woke up from the ignorance and shackles of mortals. His soul materialized. Sublimation began. Huaishir opened his eyes and stared blankly at the sky. After a long time, he finally reacted. Even though he had long been accustomed to fear, when he transformed into the Red Glove, it was still difficult to resist the despair and pain that he had once felt. It was as if someone was thrown into the deep sea and forced to grow gills. It was too rough, as if life had no meaning. Damn it, he felt a sharp pain in his head. He slowly propped himself up and drank the refreshing tea that Crow handed him. After a long time, he finally felt a little more relaxed. It seems that the deep tour of hell is very effective. Crow whistled. The Red Glove guy probably had a split operation in advance to avoid information leaks after his death. The records left behind are simply a mess. The most valuable one is probably this one. That organization, he was, yes, more than 60 years ago during the Cold War. In order to deal with the pressure from Dongsha and the Russian Federation on the Eastern Front, Holy Rome at that time made a decision to create the Sublimated Legion through racial screening and genetic modification. The name of this plan was the Fountain of Life. What you saw should be their method of artificial sublimation. It was too rough, forcibly throwing people into hell for a gamble. In the end, only 31 people succeeded in sublimation. The Red Glove was one of them. Later, because of the sequelae, only 4 people were left, and the plan was stopped. In other words, the Red Glove is actually more than 60 years old. Huaisher couldn't believe it. Yes, that's right. How does it feel to beat up an old man? Thinking about how he was almost hung up and beaten up by an old man who was already half disabled, Huaisher felt like he was in a fantasy. But what made him even more incredulous was the places he had entered. Were they really hell? Hell actually existed in this world. Although he had heard of it many times, he had never taken it seriously. It was not until he saw it with his own eyes that he realized that there were such bizarre places in this world. To be precise, all the places excluded from the border can be called hell. What the Red Glove experienced should be the abyss fragments found by the Byzantine people when they were exploring outside the border. Most of them are worthless places, but if you want to understand it in a literal sense, why sure, hell does exist in this world, but they are not worlds after death. They are worlds that have already died, tombs piled up by the wreckage of worlds from who knows how many years ago. In there, it is not surprising that anything can happen. Worlds that have died. Huaisher asked, worlds can also die? Just like how people can die. Everything will eventually fade away. If you think it is death, then it is death. Crow said calmly. However, I prefer to call it nirvana and rebirth, a cycle. Well, that's enough for tonight. You should go to bed. Crow turned around, spread its wings and flew to the basement, while Huaisher got up and went to the bedroom upstairs. At that moment, their movements both paused and turned to look at each other at the same time. At the same time, they felt the abnormality from the book of prophesied destinies. Huaisher reached his hand out, and the book of prophesied destinies appeared again. But this time, it was not as quiet as before. The book of prophesied destinies slightly vibrated, as if it had received a call and was conveying some kind of message to Huaisher. This was the first time the book of prophesied destinies had actively shown any abnormal signs to Huaisher. Huaisher looked at it in surprise, then finally looked at Crow. What's going on? Crow was silent, as if trying to figure something out. After a while, it suddenly chuckled. Interesting, she asked. When do you go to school? The day after tomorrow is Monday. Why? Crow nodded. So you're free tomorrow? Yeah. Since it's rare for you to have time, Crow thought for a moment, then charmingly winked at him. How about we go on a date together? Huaisher rolled his eyes, waved his hand, and turned to go to his bedroom. This woman has finally gone crazy. Inexplicably, before falling asleep, he suddenly thought, how good would it be if she had told him about her human form? And so, he didn't sleep for the whole night. The next day, early in the morning, Huaisher was woken up by Crow. Carrying a small backpack, Crow very expectantly jumped around his chest. Wake up, young man. A man who is not punctual will not be favored by a lady. Have you washed your hair? Have you wiped your face? Have you brushed your teeth? Have you changed into new clothes? Have you prepared a gift and a bouquet for our meeting? In the midst of Crow's noisy attack, Huaisher moved around the house with a pair of dark circles under his eyes like a walking corpse. He changed his clothes, washed his face, and brushed his teeth. Sitting at the dining table, he sluggishly stuffed the breakfast that Feng Shu brought to him into his mouth, and finally drank the whole pot of coffee. Then he looked at the time on the wall. 6:30. Are you crazy? Huaisher was furious. Even if we're going on a date, why the hell are you going on a date at 6:30 in the morning? The park isn't even open yet. Crow didn't even bother with him. At this moment, she was talking to Feng Shu. Feng Shu bent down and handed over a small flower that he picked when he was building the nursery in the morning. He smiled and praised. Today's lady looks exceptionally energetic. Crow took the flower with one wing and looked at Huaisher with an exasperated look. Look at old Feng. Look at you. Learn from him. Huaisher curled his lips. We're all old foxes. Sister, who are you talking to? Young master, respect for a lady's beauty is a necessary virtue for a gentleman. Fang Shu helped him put on his coat and said, then, after they took their things, he helped them open the door. Fang Shu's private car was already waiting in the courtyard. Sir, please. The driver, who was wearing a uniform and white gloves, bowed to Huaishir and opened the door for her. Finally, Fang Shu put the bag with sunscreen, umbrella, and coat into the car and nodded to them. I've already booked lunch, flowers, and a cruise to the park for the two of you at Brown's restaurant in the city center. I wish the two of you a happy day. Did you see? How scary can a man be when he's meticulous? Crow sighed softly on Huaishir's shoulder. Learn from him, little brother. If you have 1/3 of old Fang's skills, sister won't have to worry about you being a bachelor for the rest of your life. Huaishir didn't know what to say. He looked at Fang Shu with eyes full of awe. Fang Shu is terrifying. Chapter 105. It was a happy date. Actually, there was no date at all, and he was not happy at all. From morning to afternoon, Huaishir did not have a single moment of rest. Starting from 7:30 a.m., they went to the suburban park, then 9 o'clock a.m., East Plaza, 11 o'clock a.m., South Alley Commercial Street, 1 o'clock a.m., Exyon High Amusement Park, 3 o'clock a.m., they went boating at the Qing River in the northern suburbs. At 4 o'clock a.m., they walked across the entire Exyon High and ran to the docks. At 5 o'clock a.m., they ran to the People's Cemetery in the east. Even with a car, he still felt like he was going to die. Not from exhaustion, but from being walked to death by the crow. What kind of crazy person would run a marathon like this for no reason? It was himself. He was so naive that he thought the crow was just talking nonsense and had actually found some clues and brought him along to investigate. But in the end, she just wanted to play with him. In one day, he bought a bunch of things. He even bought himself a carved silver bird cage inlaid with mica from the flower and bird market near South Street. What kind of bird cage was that? Would there be a bird in the world that would buy itself a cage? Huaishir did not know whether she was a woman or not, but she was definitely not a crow. What kind of crow would have half a carton of beer every day and a bucket for supper? Thankfully, Exyon High was not that big and could be explored in one day. Otherwise, Huaishir felt like he would have to walk until the next afternoon and not go to school. He wanted to know what kind of medicine she was selling in this bird cage. This is a date, young man. Crow looked around happily. Even though it is tiring, you have to enjoy the process. Come, think back on this fulfilling day and tell me, are you happy? Huaishir picked up the bird cage and looked at her expressionlessly. What do you think? I think you are not happy at all. That is the fault of not making a date plan in advance. Crow looked at him with pity. But don't worry, I am happy. Just before Huaishir completely lost his motivation. Finally, he felt the vibration from the Book of Destiny again. He raised his head in astonishment and looked at the bustling building in front of him along with Crow. Now, he was certain that the thing that resonated with the Book of Destiny was in that building. Crow shook his head and sighed. I can only say that your luck is really bad. After searching for clues for a whole day, you only found the place now. I think it must be because one of us is more abnormal. Huaishir glanced at the dark crow, then stuffed the birdcage into his backpack. The crow skillfully turned into a shadow invisible to ordinary people and stood on his shoulder, commanding him as if he was driving a Gundam. Let's go then, Africa Star. She whistled cheerfully. Look what's waiting for us. In fact, the building was just an ordinary building. Some of them were office buildings, some were hotels, and some were ordinary shopping malls. After all, shopping malls like Renaissance Plaza were common all over the world. Those American businessmen were everywhere. In addition to the shopping mall on the lower floor, the Renaissance Hotel on the top floor was also one of the few five-star hotels in the city. In Xi'an High, it was considered a very high-end place. If this was before, Huai Shi might not even dare to come here and look at the prices outside the display window. But things were different now. After all, his wallet was full, and his identity seemed to have changed. With these prices, he was so confident that he could go in and take a closer look with the thought of not being afraid. Huai Shi walked into the shopping mall with his chest held high. The first floor was cosmetics, the second floor was women's clothing, the third floor was electronic products, the fourth floor was men's clothing, the fifth floor was restaurants, and so on. Initially, Huai Shi was quite nervous. He kept looking left and right, trying to find something strange, but in the end, the Book of Destiny did not move at all. As he walked, he started to scroll through his friend's circle, and like you Dongri's selfies in London. That guy, normally when he was pretending to say goodbye, he was quite smooth, but when he really wanted to leave, he did not even dare to say goodbye. Because of that, Huai Shi did not have the luxury edition that he had prepared. Now, he could only use it himself. As a result, the nutrition that he had received for the past 2 days could not be distributed. Other than the fat on his stomach, his hair was also growing crazily. It's here. Just as he was walking casually, Crow suddenly spoke. Huai Shi raised his head to look and realized that he had reached the top floor of the shopping mall. Only a gym, a cinema, or a furniture store that took up a lot of space would be opened here. When he followed Crow's line of sight, he saw that behind the cinema there was a display window of a shop. With his excellent eyesight as a ascender, he was able to discern the exquisite items displayed on the shelves. It appeared to be an antique shop. The items placed on the shelves were more or less old. Even the cabinets themselves were antique furniture with intricate carvings. Be it copper vases, silver knives and forks, jeweled music boxes, or even bone china tableware, they all seemed to reflect the light of money. The pressure was so great that Huai Shi found it hard to breathe. Can't you be more confident? It's just a bunch of old furniture. Crow glanced at this disappointing guy. Huai Shi couldn't believe it. Are you sure it's inside? If you don't believe me, you can take the Book of Destiny and take a look. The reaction will be very strong. Crow said, however, I don't recommend you do that. After all, when the Book of Destiny reacts, the thing inside will probably also react. Be careful not to alert the enemy. What exactly is going on? Huai Shi asked. Take a look, and you'll know. Crow smiled slyly and kept him in suspense. I'll go in first to find out what's inside. After saying that, she collapsed into a cloud of gray dust and quickly blended into the air. Other than a phantom that only Huai Shi could see, she disappeared without a trace. After all, in addition to her original body, most of her body was made up of a special alchemy ink. Not only could she adjust her color to achieve the effect of optical invisibility, but she also didn't have a physical body. She could turn into a cloud of gray mist at any time. It could be said that she was quite suitable for sneaking in. Huai Shi wasn't stupid enough to stand there and wait. He directly turned the corner and walked into the theater. After casually buying a ticket, he walked into the theater and sat in the back row. Holding popcorn and happy drinks, he happily began to wait for the movie to start. In the end, as soon as the dragon flew past in the movie, his vision went dark. He felt that a record from the Book of Destiny was forcefully stuffed into his brain. It was Crow. Through the connection between herself and the Book of Destiny, she actually directly shared what she saw with Huai Shi's eyes. At this moment, Crow had already swept past the front desk and the store and quietly entered their warehouse. The first thing he saw was the big iron door that was comparable to a bank vault. There were also 2 guards sitting in front of the iron door. Huai Shi was stunned. A broken antique store is so heavily guarded, If it was an antique store, of course it wouldn't be like this, but I'm afraid that this is the Renaissance Plaza's own vault. Don't forget that there are so many companies and such a big hotel upstairs. The valuables must be stored together. Crow calmly said, "Moreover, the Renaissance Group is now preparing to open up the reality market. Now it seems that they have fully opened up their stall. In the future, this store will definitely be turned into a place to secretly provide services to ascenders. When I just came in, I also saw an auction house that was being renovated. Maybe there will be an auction house here. The Renaissance Group is also related to the border. How many tycoons in America's Torres Street have nothing to do with the border? Moreover, the Renaissance Group is also a big group at the border. They have monopolized the resources of several large borders and frontline hell. Whether it's origin crystals, border relics, potions, or other things, they can all be found in their market." Crow turned into smoke and slowly seeped into the vault door. He calmly said, "It wouldn't be strange if something related to the Book of Destiny appeared." Weisher tapped the cover of the Book of Destiny in his hand and flipped it over and over. He couldn't help but ask, "Is this thing a set?" Crow's tone became meaningful. "And the book in your hand is its catalog." Now that it was ringing, it could not be because of anything else. It must be because of the fragment of the kingdom of heaven. If you can obtain it, not only will the Book of Destiny grow stronger, but you will also benefit greatly, right? If you're lucky enough to find a record of military warfare, you don't even need to look for your teacher. But wouldn't the Astronomy Association hide such a good thing? Some of them are kept, but most of the records have sunk into the depths of hell along with the explosion. I'm afraid they can't be found. However, there should be a considerable number of collections of records active in the present, the border, or hell. As far as I know, the disgraceful Faust was caught. The 3 source poetry collections Byron, Keats, and Shelley were also taken away in advance. Confession, Les Miserables, and Dream of the Red Chamber did not run away at all. They are squatting in the same place and are being kept. I guess they are having a good time now." Crow said, "That lazy bastard Moby Dick will definitely hide it, and no one can find it. There seems to be news about Rashomon and Mahamaya recently as well. Those guys, none of them are easy to worry about. With your current level, it will be difficult for you to deal with those collections. So don't think about it. I estimate that there are only 1 or 2 fragments here. Even though they have some strange effects, they won't make people think of the former kingdom of heaven. They are still within the scope of your abilities, so you can relax." Weisher stared at her for a long time before asking curiously, "Could it be that you are also—" "No, I'm not like them." Crow seemed to laugh happily. "They are prisoners of fate, and I am just a temporary resident." In the blink of an eye, she passed through the door of the vault, ignoring the various security measures as if they were nothing. She suddenly appeared in the tightly sealed vault like mist. Everywhere she looked, she could see the light of origin substances rippling. Dozens of chests were carefully placed on the shelves, layers upon layers of security and verification. In the center of the vault, however, a pair of burning eyes stared covetously at the sudden appearance of Crow. It was a wolfhound. On the stone platform in the middle of the vault, the ferocious hound made of steel seemed to come to life and opened its eyes. It immediately sensed Crow's presence and suddenly stood up. The movement of its torso caused the sharp sound of metal colliding to ring out. It bared its fangs and grinned, but as the mist shrank, Crow appeared and glanced at it, and then there was no more and then. Its ferocious appearance dissipated. It whimpered a few times before squatting back down. "Good dog." Crow nodded in satisfaction and retracted her gaze. When she turned around to look behind her, Weisher couldn't help but inhale sharply. Eyes, 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 eyes. Behind the tempered glass on the shelves were transparent jars filled with a light green liquid. Floating within the jars were eyeballs. Each jar contained at least 7 or 8 eyeballs. If the first row of jars was included, there were at least 100 eyeballs here. This was only the most horrifying thing. In the last few rows of jars were either hearts or odd-looking animal embryos. At first glance, it was as if they had entered the laboratory of some crazy scientist. The atmosphere was terrifying. What the F***ck is this? Huaishir almost jumped out of his chair in fright. I didn't come to the cinema to watch this kind of horror movie. It's just a very common organ smuggling. What's the fuss about? Crow glanced at those things and retracted her gaze. Don't worry, most of them aren't human. If you want to say, human eyes are too cheap and have no value at all for border smuggling. On the contrary, the organ tissues of some of the border mutants are in high demand in pharmaceutical research. The supply simply can't meet the demand. Huaishir swallowed. You just said most, right? Look at what you're saying. Crow was amused. Isn't shoddy goods the most common trick of capitalists? You've already bought shoddy goods. Do you expect them to give you the real thing? That's not what I meant. And my suggestion is that you don't care too much. Crow did not dwell on this topic anymore. She skipped the front row of the shelves and the few items that were obviously relics of the border mutants. Instead, she looked at the flat box in the corner. She suddenly lost her body shape and seeped into the gap of the box. Then, Huaishir saw a remnant page that was treasured on the red velvet cloth. It seemed to be old. It had already turned yellow and was on the verge of breaking. Various characters were written on it, and one could vaguely see the hand-drawn drawings of the sun, lion, snake, and embryo. I see. Crow smiled happily. Although it's said that you had bad luck on the way, you're very lucky when it comes to finding things. This record fragment is perfect for it. What? Upon hearing that there was good stuff, Huaishir's eyes lit up. An alchemy prescription from hundreds of years ago. I can't tell what it was originally used for, but from the style of the depiction of the angel, it should be the manuscript of Count Street Germain. If you trace it back, there should be a trace of the essence of the jade record. Crow sighed. You've struck gold this time. Before she finished speaking, her body suddenly dissipated and returned to Huaishir's shoulder. Huaishir looked back in shock, his smile gradually disappearing. Didn't you say I struck gold? Yes. Crow nodded. Huaishir's eyes widened. Then why didn't you take it out? Come on, you asked me, a detection ink bottle, to help you steal something. Is there something wrong? Throwing a grenade for you is already the best I can do. Crow rolled her eyes. Even if I want to take it, I have to be able to fly out of the vault with such a big box. Do you think I can do it? I don't even have hands. Then what should I do? Huaishir was dumbfounded. I've already scouted the way for you. I've opened up your vision. Can't you go by yourself? Crow glared at him with disappointment. Why are you still hesitating? Find a way to F***king steal it. No. Huaishir shook his head, seriously. If I go, won't I be stealing it? So, it's not a crime if I go. You can steal it if you want. Can't I just pretend that I don't know anything? Huaishir sighed. Plus, can't we think of a normal way? The last time a similar alchemy formula was auctioned, it was an ancient formula whose authenticity was not confirmed. The final price was 11 million. Crow looked at him out of the corner of her eyes. Are you going to use your head to buy it? So be it. I'll just F***king steal it. Huaishir gritted his teeth and reached into his pocket. He wanted to find the mask and balaclava that he had used to commit the crime, but he was stopped by Crow. What's wrong? Crow glanced at him. Do you think someone will start something here in XIN High right after you get out of prison, and you just so happen to appear near the crime scene? Do you think Division Head Fu will pull out his gun and shoot you? Huaisher finally reacted and suppressed his desire to commit a crime. How about we just forget about it? After all, collecting the fragments of heaven is one of your missions. Logically speaking, you shouldn't give it up. Crow thought about it for a moment and suddenly laughed. But we have to plan for the long term, right? The man and the bird looked at each other. It was a meaningful look. Even though Huaisher was testing the waters at the edge of room 404, he realized that he was actually quite eager to give it a try. Alibi? He asked in a whisper. Yes. Crow crossed its wings and made a very cartoonish action of thinking. AI Ching? Impossible. Huaisher shook his head. She was able to kill me with her own hands. She can't even give false testimony. Fang Shu, you need someone to believe you. Plus, he can't even leave the house. How can he be your evidence? Just as he was deep in thought, Crow suddenly asked curiously, By the way, which day is your school's anniversary this week again? Huaisher raised his eyebrows. The man and the bird looked at each other again. If that's the case, Crow whistled happily. I have a plan. Chapter 107. After returning home, Huaisher and Crow squatted in the basement and discussed until midnight. Then they began to act separately the next day. It turned out that breaking the law was a technical job, especially when you were being monitored by the authorities. The man and the bird finally decided to divide the work. Crow would prepare the tools for the crime, and Huaisher would be responsible for smoothly and not abruptly joining the school celebration. It was best to be conspicuous, the kind that had hundreds of alibis. These days, even if it was a double cross, there was still a risk of failure. It was always better to find a few more escape routes. This was the first time he was going to double cross. How to pretend that he often committed crimes. Waiting online, it was quite urgent. Huaisher thought about the steps of the entire operation in his heart. He casually pushed open the door of the General Affairs office and skillfully put on a flattering smile. Teacher Gao, about this school celebration. There was an awkward silence in the room. Huaisher stood at the door in a daze. In the dim office with the curtains down, the man lying on the desk panting looked up and was stunned to see the teenager behind him who came in without even knocking. The woman lying on the desk covered her face immediately. In the silence, no one spoke. Huaisher took a step back and closed the door. He looked blankly at the sunlight outside the corridor and scratched his head. Why is it so exciting all of a sudden? He realized that his plan to commit a crime might be aborted after taking a deep breath. He tried to calm down. He estimated that the two people inside were about to get dressed. He pushed the door open again and pretended that nothing had happened. He smiled flatteringly. Teacher Gao, about this school celebration. The office was still silent. Teacher Gao was still lying on the desk, maintaining the petrified posture just now. He heard the woman lying on the desk ask, Has he left? Damn, why are you in such a good mood? You didn't even put on your clothes after being discovered. Please continue. Just call me when you're done. Huaisher swallowed his saliva, stepped back awkwardly, and considerately closed the door for them. Then, under the afternoon sun, he wiped his sweat and frowned as he thought about how to solve this problem. Since the last time he refused to tutor his nephew's violin lesson, Director Gao of the Academic Affairs Office began to see him as an eyesore. This time, the old and new hatred exploded together. He was afraid that he would be expelled. Why don't I just be a little more vicious and go all the way? I'll grab my phone and rush in to take a few dozen photos. Then I'll force him to give me the green light and extort a few $100,000. Huaisher gritted his teeth, stomped his foot, and was about to rush in for a round of crazy shooting when he heard a stunned voice behind him. Why sure? Fu Yi, who was hugging a pile of documents, asked curiously, Why are you here? Take a walk. I'm taking a walk. Why sure's face twitched. He quickly put away his phone, turned around, and squeezed out a smile at her. What a coincidence. Are you taking a walk too? I'm here to submit the materials and reports that I've prepared for tomorrow's celebration, as well as the list of invited alumni. Fu Yi glanced at him doubtfully. You don't look too good. Did you stay up late last night? Yes, I didn't sleep well. Huai sure smiled awkwardly. Not only did he not sleep well, but he also stayed up until 4 o'clock to plan the crime. Then wait for me for a while. I'll treat you to a Red Bull after I submit the report. Fu Yi wanted to go around Huai Shi and enter the door, but Huai Shi panicked and quickly blocked her. You can't go in. You can't go in. Huh. Fu Yi tilted her head. What's wrong? Do you believe that there are demons fighting behind the door? Of course. Huai Shi couldn't say that. He also didn't want to involve her in this matter. He didn't know what to say. He could only stutter for a long time before awkwardly saying, Can you stand with me for a while? Huh? Fu Yi became more and more puzzled. Soon, she raised her eyebrows slightly and smiled softly. Okay. She took a step back, then leaned against the wall next to Huai Shi and stood still. Is this okay? She asked. It was as if she really had to stand with Huai Shi as punishment. The wind began to blow quietly. Huai Shi froze for a moment and looked back at her. The afternoon sun shone into the corridor from the window, illuminating the dancing dust and her eyes, which were like amber. Long black hair hung down from her white school uniform. Under the reflection of the sun, the strands seemed to be suffused with fine rays of light. In the moment when Huai Shi was stunned, she suddenly stuffed all the documents in her hand into Huai Shi's arms. Then she smiled triumphantly as if her prank had succeeded. Huai Shi looked down at the documents in his hand and shook his head. He didn't know why, but he also smiled. Suddenly, it seemed that nothing was important. It was thrown to the back of his mind. He leaned against the wall and looked at the way the sycamore tree swayed in the breeze outside the window. The fine sunlight shone through the shade of the tree and fell on the shoulders of the people coming and going. It was so quiet that it was like a bubble. He let out a long breath. The anxiety that had been lingering in his heart these days seemed to disappear with it. He became calm and peaceful again, as if he had just woken up from a long dream. Soon, he heard footsteps behind the door. A woman pushed the door open and saw the 2 people outside the door. She smiled awkwardly. Director Gao sent her out with a thermos box in his hand. I'll go back for lunch in the future. It's not good to let the students see you send me lunch all the time. Solo? You're just going to leave me alone? Just a solo. Huai Shi nodded as if he didn't understand what she meant. After all, if I want to sing the opera again, there won't be enough time for rehearsal, right? TSK, I always feel like you're up to something. Fu Yi took out 2 cans of Red Bull from under the vending machine and didn't pursue the matter. She just threw one to him. Remember not to stand me up at the rehearsal tonight. Definitely. Huai Shi pulled the tab and drank it in one gulp. The first step of the criminal plan, done probably. The so-called school anniversary was just that. The leaders would give a speech. Then the successful alumni would come out to give a speech. The students would choose a representative to give a speech according to the script, and then it would enter the popular donation segment. Finally, there would be a cultural performance to show the leaders and successful people from all walks of life that the money wasn't given in vain. While the school leaders led everyone on a tour of the school, the auditorium backstage was also busy. The school anniversary performance was about to begin, and people were coming and going. Dozens of students were busy preparing props and final rehearsals. The cameraman from the TV station was also adjusting the lights and camera positions. Everyone seemed to have work to do. As a result, the crowd gathered in the corner became an eyesore. Why sure, your skin is a lot better. Really? I recommend you use the latest night cream from Peppermint. It's super effective. Look at your skin. Do you just casually wipe your face every time after washing it? You can't do that. It'll hurt your skin. Huh, really? I didn't even notice. Why sure, are you going to perform this time too? Yeah, a solo. You have to give me a round of applause. Hey, by the way, did you change your bracelet? This turquoise looks pretty good. It'll be good with an agate. Turquoise and agate are both good for sleep. Look at the skin under your ear. It's a bit oily. It's because you don't sleep well. Really? Really? I've been preparing for the math competition. I've been staying up late for a long time. I recommend you use this steam eye mask. It's very good for reducing dark circles. Put it on for 5 minutes before bed. Combined with the essence I just recommended, you won't even have acne when you wake up the next morning. Huh? Really? Why sure, your phone keeps ringing. It's nothing. Maybe someone is looking for me. In the girls' group, Weisher lowered his head and glanced at his phone. He smiled wickedly at his new friends. I'll go to the piano room to get something first. Talk later. Okay. Under the reluctant gazes of the girls, the young man, who seemed to have transformed into a lover of the masses, turned around and walked towards the piano room. Along the way, he shook his head carelessly, whistled, and then opened the door of the piano room. He raised his head and drank all the potions that Crow gave him, one by one. He could only feel the sweetness, bitterness, and spiciness bursting out from the bottom of his heart at the same time. His face had already begun to change shape and soften rapidly, but his height had also begun to increase. In the end, his height had increased by 15 centimeters, and his facial features had almost completely disappeared. Fortunately, he had changed into loose clothes in advance. Otherwise, he would have looked extremely funny. He took out the heavy coat that Crow prepared from his backpack and put it on his body. Then, he pulled up the retractable collar around his neck and put it on his face. Finally, he put on the sunglasses and the hood. Even his hands were hidden in anti-cut gloves. He looked very professional. I'll be back soon. Weisher carried his backpack and jumped out of the window. While no one was paying attention, he bypassed the surveillance cameras and ran in the direction of Renaissance Square. Soon, his figure disappeared from the roofs and could no longer be seen. It looks like he hasn't reacted yet. Crow watched him go with a happy smile. Then, she looked down at the head in her arms and couldn't help but whistle again. I always feel that he can do a lot of things with this face. After all, time was short. 10 minutes later, Weisher stood on the roof, panting. When he looked back, he could no longer see the shadow of the school. Along the way, he deeply understood the benefits of the Eamsol stigmata. When he ran with all his strength, he only felt that the scene in front of him was constantly passing behind him. With the power of the rope of sorrow, he ran wildly between the tall buildings. The gray coat was the same color as the cement. It was not noticeable at all if you were far away. Coupled with the city's surveillance distribution given by Crow, no one noticed that Weisher had come to the building opposite Renaissance Square and was ready to start the crime plan. But how was she so familiar with the city's surveillance cameras? Weisher scratched his chin and looked down at his watch. He still had 20 minutes. 10 minutes to work, 10 minutes to retreat. In theory, it was enough. Crow was afraid that he would be inexperienced for the first time, so she had drawn up a number of backup plans and contingency measures for each step. She was simply teaching him how to be a criminal boss step by step. How to say, it felt quite good. The plan was flawless. Now, there was only the most critical step left. Weisher leaned on the edge of the building and looked down at the traffic on the road. The vault was in the center of the Renaissance building. In order to avoid leaving any information in the surveillance, he couldn't go up from below. The hotel above had complete security measures, so he had no room to sneak in. So there was only one way left: break through from the center. Bang! Countless glass shards flew from the outside to the inside. In the loud noise, Weisher waved his hand, and the rope popped out, hung in the room, and pulled him across the last distance. He landed with a bang. The reason why it was a bang was because he seemed to have bumped into someone. Weisher looked down in shock and saw the figure under his feet. The huge force from the sky knocked the peeing security guard unconscious in an instant. He was unconscious on the spot. Sorry. Weisher lifted his foot awkwardly. Just treat it as your punishment for peeing so much outside the pool. Before the chaos spread, he rushed out in the direction of the vault. There was no turning back. As for the rest of the score, he would go back and settle it with Crow. However, he didn't expect that his criminal plan was facing a huge crisis on the other side. 5 minutes ago, on the busy backstage, Director Gao, who came to patrol, walked around with his hands behind his back and frowned. Where's Weisher? It's so messy here. Doesn't he know how to help? I don't know. I just saw him here. I saw him. He said he went to the piano room to get something and hasn't come back yet. Director Gao heard this and suddenly became more and more unhappy. With a gloomy face, he walked straight in the direction of the piano room with his hands behind his back. It seemed that the punishment 2 days ago was not enough. If this kid was so slippery, he had to give him a little more severe warning. As he pondered over his punishment, he pushed open the door and said with a cold expression, "Weisher, you—" An awkward silence suddenly came. In the silence, Director Gao looked at the scene in the room, stunned. He opened his mouth and wanted to scream, but only a hoarse sound came out of his throat. "What's the matter?" On the chair in the piano room, the young man held a cigarette in his left hand. He seemed to be smoking happily, so happy that he even took his head off his neck. He held it in his arms, but his eyes glanced in the direction of the visitor, and his lips opened and closed. "Hey, why didn't you knock?" Accompanied by his words, a trace of scarlet liquid seeped out of the cut on his neck and slowly dripped to the ground, making a crisp sound. You, Director Gao's lips trembled, and his legs went soft. He almost sat on the ground. His face was pale, and he said incoherently, "You don't be afraid, I'll call 120, I'll call." Before he finished speaking, his eyes rolled, and he fainted. Soon, a small head came out of the gap in his neck, and there was a Ken of Fong Shu's freshly squeezed strawberry juice on her wings. Looking at the unconscious Director Gao on the ground, she couldn't help but sigh. This is troublesome. Chapter 109. She watched Director Gao pass out. Crow immediately controlled Weisher MK2 to close the door, then squatted down to look at the unconscious middle-aged man on the ground, and began to consider whether to silence him. It was not difficult to make him disappear from the face of the earth. But on the same day as Wan Li's accident, the suspect, Weisher, went missing from his school. The directivity was a bit too obvious, so she could only change his consciousness through hypnosis. No matter what, she could not let him continue to lie here. Soon, Crow, who had finished thinking, put on her helmet again, then opened the cabinet in the piano room and pulled Director Gao's body inside. The body's power system was still too weak, and she almost could not move a person. Just as she gritted her teeth and tried to pull Director Gao's legs into the box. The door suddenly opened. Fu Yi struggled to pull a pile of props into the door. Why, sure, Director Gao just asked you backstage. Would you be caught by him? Dead silence, an awkward dead silence. In the silence, Why sure MK2 looked at Fu Yi in astonishment. Fu Yi also stared blankly at the teenager who seemed to be dragging a body into the box, and was stunned. To tell you the truth, Why sure MK2 turned his head stiffly and said, he has a heat stroke. Fu Yi was even more incredulous. Looking at the blood-red liquid mixed with tomato juice and strawberry jam on the ground, she seemed to finally understand something, and her face became pale. But the moment she reacted, she immediately closed the door behind her. She looked at Why sure in a daze, gasping for breath. No, that Crow was hesitating whether to explain or use the drug to knock her out, but suddenly heard Fu Yi's trembling voice. I'll go to the chemistry laboratory to help you get the strong acid. You're going to destroy the body without saying anything. Aren't you a bit too much? Is this your family's history or your talent? Crow, who was hiding in her neck, was stunned and hurriedly stopped her. No, he really has a heat stroke. After explaining for a long time, Fu Yi seemed to finally understand something. She forced a smile and sat on the chair. She couldn't help but touch her pocket, but she couldn't find a cigarette. By the way, I'm here to tell you something. She slapped her head and finally remembered. She looked at Why Sure and said, it's time for you to go on stage. Okay. Crow looked at her worriedly, picked up the cello, and walked out of the door. But he heard Fu Yi's puzzled voice behind him. The weather is so hot. Why are you wearing high-collared clothes? My neck is cold. Why sure MK2 raised his hand and touched the seam under his collar before closing the door behind him. Next, it was time to perform. She knocked on the hidden buckle in the piano case, suddenly feeling somewhat expectant. 5 minutes ago, a black motorcade stopped in the parking lot of Renaissance Plaza. The person in charge had been waiting there for a long time. Before the car stopped, he had already gone up. Before he could speak, a pale-skinned, middle-aged man stepped out of the car. Is the security ready? It's been ordered. The person in charge nodded hurriedly. Is the delivery so urgent this time, Mr. Clement? No. Everything else is here, Clement said. The headquarters is very interested in the formula you bought a few days ago. We need to send it back immediately. Please lead the way, sir. Okay, follow me. The person in charge turned and walked to the elevator. But before the elevator opened, a shrill alarm rang. Clement's expression changed drastically. Why sure felt that he was done for. He didn't know that he had been exposed, nor did he know that someone was going to use his face to start trouble. Originally, he had already rushed directly into the vault through the internal passage, and then knocked the two guards unconscious before they could react. But he didn't expect to trigger a mechanism somewhere, and the alarm instantly rang. Now that the vault was right in front of him, it was impossible to leave. He had to at least try to break in. Why sure hurriedly took out 2 tubes of reagents and a flask prepared by Crow from his pocket. After pouring them in, he carefully mixed in a few packets of powder. Then, according to the instructions, he began to shake it vigorously. He didn't even bring a gun this time, so naturally, it was impossible to bring explosives. These days, even the street thugs knew that once guns and explosives were used, the nature of the situation would change from indefinite to indefinite, and from indefinite to dead. If the Special Affairs Division said that astronomy would take care of this, what would Why Sure do then? Investigate himself? Therefore, although Crow didn't have any difficulty in making explosives, in the end, he still recommended a more efficient method: universal dissolving agent. To be precise, it was a degraded version made from metal. After all, how could the group of alchemists easily produce something that they had been pursuing for thousands of years? It was a scavenger that could even dissolve stigmata and miracle. And this time, what Crow made was a byproduct of the process of exploring this power. It was also a reagent that alchemists used to remove impurities during key smelting processes. Because it was too dangerous for ordinary people to use, Crow's instructions and explanations were frighteningly thick. But in short, there were 2 points. First, pour it into a piece and shake it wildly. The more evenly the 2 reagents were mixed, the better. Second, when you see the light, you should quickly let go. Don't burn yourself. In the flask, the nature of the 2 reagents seemed to be quite stable without the slightest intention of mixing. They were still clearly separated. Even under Huaishi's sublimated hand speed after being single for 17 years, there was still any dispersion. Even if thousands of strands were mixed together like a ball of wool, there was still no other color. But with Huaishi's violent shaking, the mixed powder began to quickly turn red, like boiling iron filings emitting bursts of high temperature. In a flash, the liquid in the flask began to boil. Under the effect of shaking and boiling, the increasingly diluted reagent finally couldn't maintain its independent nature. For a moment, the 2 slender strands of color gently touched one another. It was like a handshake. Then, a terrifying light burst out from the dust. In a flash, like an electric current, it filled the entire flask, rushing from the boiling colors. The moment he reacted, Huaishi threw the flask to the iron door in front of him. But at that moment, the mist emitted from the self-dissolving flask had already corroded Huaishi's gloves. He quickly took them off and threw them on the ground. The traces of corrosion were still spreading, until the entire glove was burned into a pile of mud. And with the completion of the reaction, the white mist from the self-exploding flask had completely engulfed the iron door. In the mist, only the quiet sound of water could be heard. Like honey dripping from a tree, there was a viscous liquid flowing. Fortunately, under normal temperature, the all-dissolving reagent, metal version, could not maintain its nature, and this miracle for a long time. It would dissipate with rapid degradation, and in the end, only sulfur and salt would be left. Soon, the rolling mist dissipated, leaving only a pungent smell. Huaishi had already changed into a gas mask and new gloves. After the mist dissipated, he only saw the floor and ceiling riddled with holes. And where the vault's door was originally, a huge crack had silently appeared like a melting glacier. Countless melted and solidified molten iron still maintained its flowing shape, looking like mud made of iron. And Huaishi, in an instant, rushed into the vault. Time waited for no man. The fierce dog in the vault had awakened, and it had to be dealt with before it attacked and reacted. This kind of puppet made by the Border Workshop was powered by Origin Crystal. It was usually used to guard and warn important items. Due to its wide range of applications, the number of branches derived was also frightening. There were hundreds of models of this size, and among them, there were also different configurations such as the poor version, the economical version, and even the deluxe version. If it was the most powerful kind, even a rank 3 sublimator could be bitten to pieces. The weakest kind could only be called a human. And according to Crow's judgment, this kind of hound puppet was the most common type of guard. Its body was hard and strong, and it was not afraid of pain.